Hello, how are you? I hope you're good. So it's close to the middle of October, and only now am I realizing that I actually have not done a wrap up for July and August. So that is what we're gonna do today. Everything that I read in September is carrying it on to a project that I've not wrapped up yet. So I'm gonna be talking about that, but in a separate video. In July, I read a total of 1 book, so that's not gonna be hard to wrap up. But then in August, that was the readathon month, and I have read 10 books. So this is technically maybe recent reads, we'll call it recent reads, but I have spoken about these books as I read them in the readathon vlogs. If you missed them, I will link them down below. But I know some people prefer have it in one place and a bit more, just the thoughts after you read it, not during. This is what I'm bringing to you today, but I thought to make it a bit more interesting, we're gonna sort them by compile rating, and we're gonna start with the one that scored the least and move ourselves up to the top, I guess, of the last 11 reads that I had. With the great sadness, the last book, well, the first book, but the one that scored the lowest, which is so sad because it is a sequel to a book that I actually really enjoyed. Against the odds, because it is set in a fantasy world where our setting is a variety of little islands and some are sinking and we don't know why, and there's a sci-fi element and bone magic and amazing animal companions. So you probably know by that particular point which book I'm talking about. And I believe the first one came as 4 stars, but this one only is 2/2.5 if we're doing the halves, with a compile rating of 4.57. And that is the Bone Shard Emperor. I think the main reason why this one actually felt quite flat, actually the size of it. I just think that it could have been condensed. I don't need it to be fast, but when I tell you that nothing happened, I mean it. I feel like the characters that I really was invested in the first book were actually the weakest characters this time around. The characters that I did actually care more about in this book were just not as frequent chapter-wise. So overall, it just felt, I felt like it lost its charm. Characters felt very different to what they were before. There was a lot more, I guess, political meandering, but even then it just didn't feel appealing, at least to me, which was really sad. One good thing, obviously, and that's definitely saved this book to me, is we got more animal companions, and the animal companions in this is just, they're just done so well. I just wish that everything else was as well. This could be completely an unpopular opinion. I'm not actually sure what the general consensus is about this book, but in my eyes, this was sadly a disappointment, and I don't even know if I'll read the third one. I think it might depend on how long it is. As an example, this one is like 550 pages, and I swear to you, it didn't need to be that way. The strongest points for this book, in my opinion, were, first of all, that it made sense. Like, most of it did make sense. And then the writing style. I think it is very approachable. If this is technically an adult title, but I do think it's very much on the cusp. So it's a bit of a crossover. If you are intimidated by bigger epic fantasies, I think this is very approachable, so it's good for that. In the 10th place, with a total of 5.21, we have a book that I knew could be a risky endeavor for me because actually of the writing style. So whilst I love the writing style in the Bone Shard Emperor, this one I think would be a plus to a lot of people, but if you know my reading style, I don't always get along with a very lyrical, very poetic writing style, which this definitely is. But at the core, the story is about 2 time-traveling agents from opposing teams who are trying to stop one another. It's a little bit like Killing Eve, where one is trying to kill another, but I loved Killing Eve until the last season. And this one just didn't have that intensity to me. They did interact through secret letters, which was interesting, but I think the way the letters were received were just too quirky for what I think the story needed for my liking, to focus more on emotions and their connection and the tragedy and maybe some time travel, because obviously it's me, so I will never say no to that. But it really paid a lot of attention to the bizarreness of it all, which also is quite interesting because obviously time travel, you can do whatever you want with it. There's no right or wrong answer per se. What it reminded me a lot with that type of quirkiness is the Starless Sea. So if you did enjoy Starless Sea, you might actually really love this book. I suffered through Starless Sea. I only finished it because I had a live stream and then I couldn't attend the live stream. So overall, just bitter. But it's that type of writing where you might like bite into an acorn that fell 30 years ago, and then from the skin of it, you will taste and smell the letters that are coming to you from the other side or something. You know, like it's just very, very extra, which I don't mind in small quantities, but this was not a small quantity, even though the book is itself quite short. But it was very, very, to me, it's kind of like for the sake of it, but this book is very loved, so this is obviously just not for me. But I love the premise. This is why it still came out as like a middle ground, like a 3-star. Because I love the premise so much. It's like probably one of my favorite type of settings. We have a queer love story, we have time travel, we have drama. But it just missed on a lot of points as much as it had a premise to be like my favorite ever, you know? And overall, it just didn't make a lot of sense, not even in the sense that it was supposed to not make sense, but in the bits that were supposed to make sense, they didn't. I think, at least. It was just, it was convoluted. I think if I had to pick strong points, I would still say an atmosphere, because it is very quite different, and possibly writing style for you, not for me, but for you maybe. You have to go with the vibe. This is a vibe book. Number 9 is a book of 2 parts. So the first part, we have just a general kind of, again, quite quirky commentary on just society, which normally I like. But again, the quirk, and this is, I feel like it's a me problem as much as it is like a writing style problem, probably more so, is that to me, a lot of those times, the quirkiness, it either hits really well, but it's so rare for me that it does, or it comes across as pointless. And I feel really mean saying that, because could I do better? No, but I'm obviously rating this from a reader's perspective. It just felt for the sake of it, you know? It feels try hard for me. It's yeah. So the first part was quite weak, but then the second part really takes like a weird turn, and we follow like a personal tragedy of the writers who lost a niece, I want to say, and through the grief of all of that, and the world at the core of it is like online versus reality, and how weird it is. And I love that topic. I talk about this like a lot with my friends as well. I think that the reason why a lot of us are struggling with like mental health, it probably is not only because we're more aware of those things so we can recognize them, but because we have the online spaces now, and we're just overflown with amount of people we're supposed to know, and also the news, and it's like a cycle of, you know, obviously having to be on your guard, because what is reliable, what isn't, and the information flow is not necessarily a good thing always, but we're maybe not calibrated quite yet to handle that, and so we all struggle. Obviously, the continuous unprecedented times are not helping, but anyway, so it's not for the lack of interest in the topic, but I do think that the first bit, like, it did set that kind of bizarre tone to it, so it definitely wasn't a bad book, but the second part I think was very interesting. It's definitely, you know, all of the books come with content warning, so definitely look them up if you have topics you would like rather avoid. This one definitely has a lot of them. It came to 5.64 and a 3-star, and it is No One Is Talking About This. I definitely don't regret listening to it. I did listen to it, and you know, if this sounds like it would be your cup of tea, I think it is a great audiobook to put up when you're just doing something, because it's not very hard to listen to at all. So I would still maybe recommend it, but it was definitely not without its flaws. It definitely gave me type of Haha, look at me, how relatable vibe. But I do think it's not as bad as a lot of the reviews make it seem, because I think the reviews were mainly angry by the fact that it was awarded something. It was, I can't remember what it was, but it won some big award, and I think the main criticism was that there were some other, I'm gonna put it in quotations, more deserving, because I don't know. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. More deserving books out there could have been. So I think it's because of that. I think there's a lot of people who picked it up because it was nominated. So, you know, the expectation was set. But I think it's like it has some value to be taken out of, like as in a perspective, as a story of someone's experience. Do I think it's original? Not really. Do I think it's like above brilliant? No. But I do think that every person's point of view is worth reading. You don't have to agree or disagree. You don't even have to have an opinion about it. It's someone else's life, you know? And I like those accounts. So, kind of like midway, which makes sense because it's 3 stars. At number 8, another one by an author that I have read before, and it's kind of also a little bit sad because I did enjoy the other 2 more. So the first book that I read by this author was The Flat Chair, was really fun. The second one was The Switch, was also fun, maybe a bit less fun, and this one continues that kind of downward trend for me, but it came as 6.86, and we do pump it up to 3.5 stars. Yay. I think, oh, and it's the road trip. I think the good bit about this was how messed up everyone was. If you like those type of settings, similar to maybe In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, where every character is not really made to be likable. I mean, there are some parts of the characters that you can obviously like, but they're definitely not set up to be perfect and shiny and likable. And I like that when it's written, you know, well, which I think this was in parts. It was definitely really messy. This was a messy book. It is a second chance romance, which I also know is not the favorite, it's not a fan favorite, and I think I am in agreement with that, but I'm not as repulsed by the idea than I think a lot of people are. We jump through time, which is also actually quite similar to In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. We have then and now. Now we are driving with our friends, and we had to carpool with our ex to a wedding, and everything just goes wrong. And in the then part, we're following them from the very beginning. Obviously, you lose that kind of like will they, won't they, when you know they will. So there's not that kind of, well, I personally didn't get any type of stomach movement. I mean, the butterflies. I said that weird. It's interesting. Yeah, it was an interesting setup, and I think in theory worked a bit better than in practice. Like reading it, I felt myself kind of bored in the then parts. I was definitely more invested in the now parts, where the mess was taking part, and was obviously the background information was very crucial because we're just following the now and as it was happening. I think my main letdown was, you know, the conflict point. I just felt like the characters acted stupid, but then people do stupid things, so, you know. Anyway, it was definitely one of those like miscommunication things that made me super angry. It's just, you know, but you know, it's, you know, people do be like that. I did read it pretty quickly, so I think intrigue was one of the strongest part. I do think it was done interestingly enough, but I didn't love it as much as the other one. And I also just don't know if this should be really put in like a romance book category, which I think it is sorted that way, but I think it's to the detriment of the actual book. I feel like if it was more like a live drama, I don't even know. But yeah, to me, that book is more similar to In My Dreams I Hold a Knife than any of her other books, which I think is also interesting because obviously we're doing something different. Okay, in the 7th place, we have, and it goes in order as well, which is funny, but we have the 3rd volume of Witch, is a story about young witches who discover their powers and a different hidden world and other creatures who slipped by into this world, and now they have to be the guardians of these portals. And we have elemental magic, and the main reason that I picked this back up is because it was my childhood favorite. I love them so much. So I thought I'm gonna continue on, and I think the reason that we have like the third, second, and first in that kind of order going to better, I think is because the nostalgic shock was really strong with the first one, and it was just extra special, and then it kind of dwindled down a little bit, or maybe plot, I can't tell. But yeah, it was fun. I don't have too much to say. I also feel like I've spoken about it quite a lot recently, so I'm gonna move on. But it did get 6.86 and 3.5 stars. I think the characters throughout the rating probably remain the strongest point for me, because obviously we are following these girls. Number 6, so basically middle of the line, is going to be the most shocking thing ever that it's not at number 1, I think, for people. And sadly, it isn't. By no means do I mean that this is a bad book. I don't mean that. I'm just putting it out there. As the biggest fangirl of the author and their work and their mind, I think this book was brilliant in a sense of how it wrapped up, and how your own views and maybe hesitations about that you have throughout the book, or I did throughout the book, are kind of like explained and handed to you at the very end, being like, did you think that? This is why you thought that. Like, I struggled to care about the outcome, and then later on it was like, well, maybe humans only were designed to care about this and not that. And I was like, oh, fuck. I had a lot of fun with those realizations, and I think this is one of the strongest epilogues, to me personally, that I've ever read in books. Like, it was a very strong epilogue for me. But the epilogue was the best part, and there were parts in the book, especially the middle to end, and even the culmination of it, that I just didn't care for. I started like almost speed reading through bits. Granted, those were like, again, very detailed fight scenes, but it was always like almost extra written to you how improved and just how it's done. Like, it's very it's hard for me to tell without spoiling things, so I'm gonna stop. But it's Upgrade by Blake Crouch, aka my most anticipated read of the year, no biggie. It got 6.93 out of 10, which is a 3.5 star. It's very close to a 4, but not quite there, and I think that does sum it up. As much as I loved and was like a little bit mind blown with my realizations at the very end, and that was very fun to discuss, it lacked a little bit. It did. I'd like to believe that it was on purpose to prove that set point at the end. That is what I believe, but it's still, like, does it change the experience? Yes and no. So I don't know. But the premise of this is that there are some gene scientists that are intervening with how humanity is going to be, and some people think that that's okay, and some people think that it's not, and some people get an upgrade and some people don't. It's very much not a new concept, I feel like, as speculative fiction goes. That is a concept we've seen a lot, especially in some like earlier sci-fi movies, so it's not gonna shock anyone by any means, but I do still think it's a good read. But I am a little bit biased with this, but I will say it's definitely the lowest one. Like, if anyone is going to pick up Blake Crouch, I would absolutely recommend Dark Matter or Recursion before this. And it pretty much got 7s across the board, apart from Characters, which came out as 6.5. The weakness as well, but everything else was also just kind of like okay, but not brilliant. At 7.43 and a 4 star, we're climbing. Was the second volume, of which I don't have much to say about it, to be honest. I think I'm just gonna skip. The intrigue was high and the characters were great. Number 4, we're getting to the good stuff. Number 4 came as 8.07. One of the better YA books I've read, especially recently. I had this on my radar for the longest of time, but I just never really got to it. And it was a little bit complex to grasp it. But once I got there, I thought that it was such a rich story. It was beautifully done. Things just kept happening one after another, but and I think this is such a key thing for me as a reader. Things kept happening, but with enough slow parts between characters for us to build, you know, attachment to those relationships, and that's what really matters to me. And so on top of having a very interesting fantasy setting and interesting magic system and a very clear setup, really enjoyed it. The writing style was also beautiful. So it's Raybearer, stunning cover. As a plus. Doesn't influence the rating, but still. And this is all about a girl who lives almost like a prisoner. So it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome a little bit. Raised by her mother, who definitely has ulterior motives and sends her off to this court to get taken as one of the prince's inner court members, who then are made the only people who could actually harm the prince. So otherwise there's like a spell and no one can actually cause bodily harm or kill the prince. And she is sent with that kind of intention. Obviously, once she escapes her place, like she starts learning of other things and, you know, the whole thing. But it still keeps being a bit complicated, and I enjoyed that nuance because I feel like sometimes with those type of stories, because we've seen that premise setting a million of times, like it's very similar. You know, girl goes into a court of royals and then wants with an intention to kill someone and changes her mind kind of thing. But I really enjoyed the nuances that still remained and conflicting feelings, and even though there's some magic involved with those, but I just enjoyed that. The thing that kept it away from 5 stars, I think, is the very end. And the way that it's set up for the second book, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I already did the work. Why are you gonna make me do more work in the second one? So I'm not sure about that. But overall, I thought this was a great read. And I say that, but I obviously will read the second one because I did really enjoy it. It scored really highly in characters, atmosphere, and the writing. And the weakest point was plot. I can't remember now for sure what it was. I think I did mention in the vlog, but there were definitely a couple of things that I was like, this could have been done differently. And I remember this was quite strong because I remember speaking with my Patreons on Discord, and then they put their like 2 cents onto why this was done. But I still remember feeling like, you know. Number 3 at 8.36 is also at 4.5 stars, which is funny because looking back, I don't know, I think I might have, like, enjoyment-wise, I prefer this. But clearly, rating-wise, this was a tiny bit higher, and I think it was maybe due to the characters. It was very easy to root for them. And I think if you like Raven Boys, and especially the Ronan line, you will enjoy this one, and it's Cemetery Boys. I have spoken about this in my recent video about the autumnal read, so I'm not gonna linger on it because I think I've spoken about it. But it is set during your Day of the Dead time, and we follow a trans boy who is struggling to get accepted by his family, and also summons a ghost, and then that all happens. I thought it was very atmospheric. That is where it scored almost the highest. The higher one was a little bit the characters, which obviously those two put together, it makes for a good time already. It really didn't score low in any points. A tiny bit in logic, and then tiny bit in the writing style. As the writing style, it wasn't my total favorite, but I also think this was a debut book. It didn't stand out to me as anything exquisite, but the story was easy to follow and quite fun. Same time, also touching, and it was just a good time, and I think it's perfect for this time of the year as well. So if you're looking for a chill read, I will say the writing style was the lowest point for me, and could possibly be detrimental to some people enjoying this book. It's very contemporary, but not in always the best way. Like, it's very kind of casual, I guess. At number 2, but technically almost maybe 1, I don't know, because number 1 is a bit silly, but technically at number 2, we have I'm Glad My Mom Died, which is an autobiography by a person I've never watched, seen, or heard of. Because I did not grow up with iCarly. I've not seen a single episode of iCarly. I had no idea who this person is. But we listened to this on our kind of like a road trip bit with Logan, and I literally wanted to go back in the car to listen to it. It was very captivating, despite the fact that it was literally just an account of her life. But it was so easy to follow, and in parts sadly relatable, despite how far away like her life is from most of ours in many ways, some good, some bad. And it's all about this like pathological narcissistic behavior that it then is put on a child actress by a very wrongly ambitious, I guess, mother. And it's complicated because it was put through this lens of, you know, still having that relationship that is hard to put into perspective because you're a child, you rely on your mother is actually kind of kind to you while simultaneously doing things that you will only later realize how fucked up they were. And I think it was written beautifully and was read beautifully. It was also narrated by the author herself. And it was just very kind of, it came across at least very honest and raw, and it was almost like monotonous in the way that it was told, and like very dry humor. But at the same time, it was just very interesting to see all those realizations come to her later on. But the mother also had cancer, which was another layer on top of it. So it was complex in its simplicity, and I enjoyed that. And enjoy seems like a wrong word to say because it's absolutely traumatizing. A very interesting account, let's say that. And it came to 8.43 and 4.5 stars. And the number one from this list is Which Part One? And I think it was just such a step back into my childhood. I just could not smile. And I immediately wanted to read all the rest of them. That since like dwindled down a little bit, but it came as 8.71, so also 4.5. We sadly do not have any 5-star reads in this batch, but hopefully in the next one. It's just wholesome. I don't know how much wholesome it would be if I didn't have all of this attachment to it from, you know, all of the memories and stuff of collecting the single issues. It was something. So I'm not sure how much of that is nostalgia. It doesn't even matter because all reviews, in my opinion, are absolutely subjective, and there's no such thing as an objective opinion about anything like this. So at that point of time, I just felt like it was a great time. And yeah, that actually concludes everything. Let me know if you agree with any of these opinions or if you have different ones. I would love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you with a spooky vlog, I believe, very soon. Thanks for watching. Stay awesome, stay kind, and I'll see you soon. Bye!